Hello everyone, my name is Fernando Vizcaino and welcome back to another Data in the Wild episode hosted by Data Meaning. Before I begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel below and click the bell to turn on notifications to be the first to know every time we upload a new video.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining this training session. Today we'll be covering Alteryx Gallery APIs. But of course, if you would like to learn more about data meaning and Alteryx as a whole, please follow data meaning on LinkedIn and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So, my name is Fernando Vizcaino. Very nice to meet you. I'm part of the enablement team of data meaning. I'm an Alteryx ace, working with Alteryx for 7 years, have all the certifications there, and I'm doing a lot of work in the community as well. But let's get started. So our agenda for today is gonna be everything related to the API. All the operations, both user and admin side, how to get access, how to get started, how to use the interactive documentation that Alteryx provides, a few examples as well as tips for you that had no idea where to look. So let's first talk about the access. So as you can see, you have two groups of endpoints, one for users, and that means end users or developers, artisans, and one for admins or curators, right? And for both of them, you have two different kinds of APIs. You have the subscription API and API access, and you have 4 different groups of endpoints. So for each of the APIs, you have here the access that you can have. And of course, as you can see, if you are admin and you have API access, you have access to everything related, all the endpoints. But of course, I will navigate and I will show you an overview of all the endpoints that we have there for both of groups. But let's start by the user operations. So first, you have everything related to workflow interaction. So you will be able to download a list of all workflows, apps, or macros. We have a lot of optional parameters as well. You'll be able to download automatically all the workflows. So let's say, for example, you want to save as a backup all the workflows in all studios or in your own studio. So in this case, since we are accessing and using the user operations, then you'll be able to download everything in your own studio automatically. You will be able to call and to execute an app, and you will be able to get outputs from those apps. So everything related to workflow interactions, but of course we have user interface interaction. So let's say you are running an analytical app with questions in it, with user interface tools in it. Then you'll be able to get those questions and also answer those questions, as well as send credentials and send input files as well. So if you have a file browse tool in your workflow, in your analytical app, you can also send a file to this workflow. And of course, you'll be able to run jobs, right? So you can here get your job ID, and also if your workflow or analytical app is producing an output, then you'll be able to also download that using this specific endpoint. And when we talk about admin operations, we have the management. So you have login information that you will be able to download. Of course, this is only for admins. You'll be able to find all the subscriptions, all the collections, all the users, and any updates in any of these groups, right? Everything related to schedules, everything related to the forecast of schedules, and you'll be able to check all the jobs in the last run or the current state for those workflows. You'll be able to download and check all the data connections that are configured in your gallery, and also all the assets, insights, workflows, macros. You can see here that you have a lot of options. So everything related to server management, login information, assets, user schedules, anything whatsoever, you'll be able to access using this endpoint. But also, as an admin, you are also able to manage your workflows. So a bit different than the user operation. So here as an admin, you will be able to see all the workflows from all studios, from all collections, and here you'll be also able to publish workflows. So as a user, you have the option to download workflows, and as admin, you have also the option to publish a workflow to a specific studio, as well as finding workflows that are marked ready for migration and update that flag. So the idea here is if you have two environments, a dev and prod environments, you'll be able to do the migration of workflows from one environment to the other, all are using APIs. Okay, so next step here, so let's learn how to get started actually. So the first step that you need to be aware here is that it's if you have access to those APIs. So for that, you need to go to your own profile. There you'll see, for example, here in the keys tab, so this I'm not seeing any kind of key, and that means that I don't have access neither to the subscription API to the API access, the admin API. So how to get the subscription API? So of course this you need to call or ask your admin, your curator, to go, for example, for one specific studio, your studio. So let's go here to the data science studio, the studio that I'm included. So here I need to ask the curator, or the curator needs to enable the API. So as you can see here, disabled, enabled, you can save, and then after saving, this is what you will be seeing in your own profile. So all the users inside that subscription /studio will now have access to your key and secret, your login and password, you may say. Alright, so this is related to the subscription API, the user side. And what happens if you want the admin API? So in this case, you need to ask your curator to go to your user page, for example here for Andrew King, and then I have the option here for API access. Basically you need to enable, save it, and then now you'll have access to this API. And of course, even if you are a developer, an end user, you'll be able to use this API access, but of course you will not have access to the admin endpoints. You'll be able to do everything related to your own studio, own assets, but you'll not be able to see the gallery as a whole, right? Okay, so now we have all the accesses needed, and let's get started. So now actually for you that have no idea how to get started, luckily Alteryx have created a page, an interactive documentation for the APIs. So for you to have access to that, you need to go to the question mark here, API documentation, click on it, and then you'll see something like this. And as I said before, you have subscription and user v2. This is users related, the user side, and you have admin v1 and v2. These are for admins only. So you need to get your API key and secret, include that here. And now you can navigate in all the endpoints here down below. So let's start, for example, with subscription. So here you can see all the optional parameters that you can include, but of course one thing that you can do, let's just try it out. So you can click here and try it out, and this is the result that you have. So you have a list of all the workflows, and the most important part here is the ID. So this is the workflow ID. So for this analytical app example, this is the ID that I'm gonna be using for all the next steps. Another way of getting this ID, if you want to do that manually, you can go to the workflow inside your studio. As you can see, I'm in my own private studio and I have the same ID over here. Okay, right. So with this ID, since I know that I have questions, user interface in it, I can go to the second step and get all the questions. So in here, the only thing I need to include is the app ID and run, try it out. And what I get here is all the interface tools that I have in that specific analytical app. So I have a text box and the value, the default value is blank. Also, of course, if I have multiple interface tools, this is what I'm gonna see. So I have the name, here the name of my interface tool, I have is a text box and also a list box with two different options. In the case of the list box, customer A and customer B, and this is what I need to copy because I'm gonna be using in the next step. So the name of the tool and also the value that I'm gonna be using, if it's a list, of course. Then with this information and if with my workflow ID, I go to the next step that now I'm gonna be running this workflow. Then here I need to include my app ID once again, and I have the values here. But of course, in this case, I have an schema here. So you only need to click here. And by clicking, you have this moved. It's basically a copy and paste of the structure to the values. And I need to include something similar to this. So all my questions, I have my interface tool name, the value that I'm including there. So my name, for example, and the second interface tool with the value. Try it out, and what I'm gonna see here is that the workflow is queued. So now I need to wait, of course, for this workflow to finish running. I have my job ID here, and this is the most important part of this endpoint. So I have the workflow ID, also the job ID. And for my next step, then actually I'm gonna be using only the job ID. The idea for these endpoints is for me to check if my workflow has run successfully or if it is still running. Right, so job ID, try it out. What I'm gonna see here, for example, that the workflow was run successfully and of course is also completed. In this case, in my example, in my analytical app example, I have an output ID. So I'm outputting a file. The file is called example.yxdb, and also I can include and download in these formats. So this is what I'm gonna be getting from this request. So the output ID, the format, and that's it. So for my next request, basically including my job ID, the output ID that I just got it, the format, it's optional, but if you want you can include here a CSV or any other that we saw in the last slide, and try it out. So by trying it out, I'm seeing the body here. So I have a very simple output, but I have the customer column, customer A, total sales 30, and also my name here. So this is the idea. So I was able to fill my interface, my questions, run the workflow, and get the outputs all tested here in this interactive documentation. Of course, you have the same for the admin side for to test it out. And then after testing, if you are able to understand everything, then you can develop or you can include in other platform these endpoints, and you will be able to call from other platforms Alteryx workflows. Actually not workflows, but only analytical apps. So that's one very important step. With Gallery APIs, you are only capable of running analytical apps, not workflows. Right? So this is an important thing for you to keep in mind when working with APIs. But alright, so now that we understand how the interactive documentation works, let's talk briefly about the authentication methods. So we are using here the OAuth 1, version 1. It's called single-legged, and here you have all the parameters required. Of course, this is if you are interested in building by yourself this step, but of course not needed. We have a lot of examples. We have macros in Alteryx that are doing this step automatically, but if you want to create or if you want to include this in a different platform, then this is your way to go, right? But talking about an example actually, so the example that we just created in the interactive documentation, so this is the idea, right? So let's say for example that you want to run an analytical app the same way as I showed you earlier. So you need to run this first endpoints, you need to get the app ID. This is the first step. Alright, so maybe you are working with share folders or with data sources and you need to include credentials in it. So this workflow, you need special credentials. Then you can use this endpoint to call and to get all the credentials available in your server, and of course that you have access to. If you have a file browse tool in your analytical app, you can also upload this file using these methods. Okay, so I have all the information here, and now you can put your workflow, your analytical app in the queue to be run in Alteryx Server. Of course, you'll be using the app ID. You must use the app ID, and these are optional information that you don't actually need to include. Highly optional. Of course, that after getting this, you'll see questions, app ID. Actually, these parts for you to get all the questions in your app ID. This is optional also. So of course you can have an analytical app without interface tools. If it's your case, then you only need your app ID, file ID, credential ID, and also the priority, right? So if you want this workflow to pass all the others on the queue, then you can leave this as a high priority or critical priority, for example. Then after including your analytical app in the queue, you'll get the job ID. With the job ID, you will get if your workflow was successfully running. So if it's a big workflow, it takes 1 hour to run, then this you need to create a loop for you to always check if the workflow is complete. Then after the completion, you can get your output ID and of course all the information from it. Okay, so it's a simple example, but for you to understand how to interact with these APIs. So have a group of APIs for you to be able to run an analytical app. You have a group of endpoints for you to be able to migrate a workflow between environments, and of course a group of API requests, endpoints if you want to start managing or adding governance to your server, right? So finally, a few tips. So of course I have shown you everything in the interactive documentation, but if you want to see this working in other languages, you can use, for example, one here for C# and JavaScript, and this you have actually fully functional samples available for you to download on the interactive documentation page. So very important. But also, of course, if you are working with Alteryx and you want to build workflow migration process inside of Alteryx, you can do that as well. And you have Alteryx macros available on the community that are doing, for example, the authentication part automatically. So don't always keep in mind that you can use the community and all the assets available there for you to leverage and to help optimize your work. You have also one migration, workflow migration on beta between environments. So if you want to migrate workflows from an environment to another, you have already an example on the community as well. But of course, if you are more into Python, we also have a Python library available on GitHub for you to start using. So you don't need to create anything by scratch, and you have a lot of different possibilities here. But that's it for today. I hope you find it insightful and exciting. But of course, if you enjoyed this session, don't forget to follow Data Meaning on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of content related to Alteryx Designer, Server, and many other platforms there. And thank you for watching and have a great day.
If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to know when future videos are posted.